Hi, all. It's Jan of the Jan Files. I'm going to talk today very specifically about what the Republican Party stands for. Most of us have known this for a long time. Actually, they've become more depraved over the years, but many of us still have understood at a gut level what they represented. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that and how that is playing out. So we are going to have I gather, more information from Trump tonight at 9 p.m. about the Iran war. Now, we think it's about the Iran. I don't think anybody really knows what he's going to say. I bet you he doesn't even know, because it could change between now and 9 o'clock. Okay? And we've heard all of the rhetoric around the Iran war. We've won. We've accomplished all our goals. We still want to get the Strait of Hormuz open. And there's Karg Island where there are oil reserves. And, there's all this, there's all these other things. We can put boots on the ground. He may say that tonight. He may say we're pulling out, that we've accomplished everything, because he will never ever say that we couldn't accomplish what we thought we could. And so the whole thing is a disaster on a scale that we have not seen for decades, because the consequences of this war won't just go away. They will be felt for decades to come in many ways, including the retaliation of Iranians against the United States and Israel. So let's just focus on what have the Republicans shown us in the past. Let's just leave it to since he became president, okay? Because we could be here all night. The point being that they clearly have no regard for the American public. They don't care whether you live or die based on what they say about healthcare and how they want to even rob healthcare right now to give Trump his $200 billion that he wants to fund this Iran war, more so than we've already funded it, which I gather, according to most resources, is $1 billion a day. So he wants more money than that. He wants another $200 billion. So $200 billion. Think about that for a second. How much money that is and what that could do for actual Americans. Because this war in Iran has nothing to do with us. We have not changed the regime. We now have a harder lined regime in power. We have not emboldened the protesters. We've likely shut them down. We have not gotten anything anywhere with a nuclear stash or uranium that they have. And likely won't. And they have they're in a much better position than we are right now. Now, I know their Air Force is decimated. I know their Navy is decimated. Those were never threats to us. Us being the United States. I'm not including Israel in this. I'm only including the United States. And so we now found ourselves, because of the Republican Party, who has no balls, no ovaries, no gut, no courage, nothing. All they do is care about Donald Trump's approval. And even given the state of our political world right now, they should know they're in the shithole. They're going to lose huge in the midterms. Huge. And I believe we're going to get the Senate and the House. And yet they're still sucking up to him. Why? I don't know. I'm assuming that they have zero courage, that many of them came into power when they were just Trump lovers. They just wanted everything he was talking about. And so now they're finding, oops, maybe he didn't do everything he said he was going to talk about, and certainly the public is, because his numbers are in the toilet. So let's talk about the fact they would rather fund a war of choice that has no meaning to Americans, that already 13 American soldiers have died. I believe it's more than that. I believe we're being lied to, and I don't know how many Americans, untold Americans, have been wounded. Okay, we don't know those numbers because that's just not something that they're making available to us. Like, that's private information. It's not private information. And so let's talk about, they want to spend $200 billion. Now, I want to talk about the big, beautiful bill. And I did a deep dive more than once because it kept changing. If you look back at my old videos, you'll see that. And you will see that the big, beautiful bill that they called it, that Trump called it, that was passed only with Republican votes, was a disaster on so many levels. And we're starting to really understand what that looks like. So in terms of, let's just start with healthcare. And I'm just going to focus on healthcare for right now, because we cut, and I as usual, I got my little cheat sheet here. We cut Medicaid by 15%, equal to $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And you know why they say they did this? Is because they talk about Medicaid fraud, which is near to almost non-existent. Most of the fraud that occurs is within the provider network, not the people who benefit. And let's just lay out a little bit about who actually benefits from Medicaid and what the percentage is of each of those groups. So the biggest beneficiaries to Medicaid are children. 48% of Medicaid recipients are children. Okay, 48%. 20% are the elderly and the disabled. 10% are actually adults who work full time. In other words, the working poor. We have 5% of adults who work part-time. 3% are for caregivers, people who are taking care of other people so that they cannot work. 2% are students in school, and 2% are too sick or disabled to work, and they're not captured in the disability category above. These people who are slipped through or don't yet have a formal designation. And 10% are other adults. Now, these are people in between jobs. They're in rural areas where there's no available work. Okay, so when these small towns and a factory moves out, a company moves out, they have the work available close by. And so that's a total of like 10% of those people who can't get work. The numbers are down, and they look at those numbers when they say, okay, yes, you can or can't get Medicaid. Now, they just cut that by $1 trillion because they felt like, oh, there's so much fraud. There's people who are getting this. No, undocumented people do not get Medicaid. Can we just stop saying this? Can we finally all get that through our fucking heads that they don't? The only time is an emergency situation. Let's say there's a major car accident and you're brought into the ER. They're going to take you and they're going to take care of you. They're not going to give you ongoing care. They're going to take care of you then. Same thing, they will take care of pregnant women. So yes, we're human beings. We at one point were a country that really wanted to be the best of the best. We don't now. We don't give a flying fuck. All we care about is lying and making this country a white nationalist hellhole. That's what they want. They want this to be a white nation. They want this to, get rid of the other people who don't or are, drain on the system. But they don't understand that there's a big give back here with some of these people. But the other biggest issue that they constantly talk about, which I mentioned just a second ago, is that undocumented, as they say, illegal aliens get benefits. They don't. Do not allow them to spread that bullshit. It is a lie. It doesn't happen except for the circumstances I told you in. Now, there's also Medicare, which is we're going to get hit with a reaction to what is happening now in 2026, because I want to say this right. Okay, sorry, here it is. Oh, and by the way, that Medicaid cut impacts 11.8 million people. They don't give a shit. Chump change, right? Who are these people? They're poor people, so we don't care. Why should we care about them? Here we are. Sorry, I'm going to Medicare. Oh, it's on the other side of my sheet. And it wasn't initially cut when they first wrote the big beautiful bill. What's happening and what is going to continue to happen is that it's going to experience cut through a back door, because it's called a statutory pay-as-you-go, which the CBO says will impose a $45 billion cut to Medicare in 2026, this year. 2026, a $45 billion cut to Medicare, and an additional $536 billion in automatic cuts over 9 years. People have, that hasn't hit, I don't know exactly where it is and whether it's hit or not, but it's going to one way or the other, because there's a statutory provision under the CBO that means you have to pay as you go, which honestly I don't understand, given all the other things that we're not paying as we go. And the debt, the trillions of dollars of debt that the Republicans have put us under. They have done this all by themselves. And now we are also looking at FEMA. FEMA has been gutted. Kristi Noem couldn't find the time, I guess, to sign for people in North Carolina to get relief funds. Now, here is the status of FEMA, all due to the Republicans. I'm sorry. So the big beautiful bill once again slashed FEMA's core budget by nearly $10 billion in 2026. And it also canceled FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, which had provided $750 million to $1 billion annually for flood protection, stormwater systems, and wildfire prevention. In other words, to build things into local infrastructure to help them with, in case these kinds of things happen again. They're giving them some preventive tools. Tools, I guess, is probably the better. Cut. And Trump himself would like to just eliminate FEMA and send it to the states. Which, that's not where it belongs. It is the federal government's responsibility to use our taxpayer dollars to help us, not put an additional burden on states, especially given the fact that we are just dropping billions all the time in terms of this war and his other wars that he wants to, let me just say, we can look forward to spending more with his other wars that he wants to invade Cuba. He wants to now invade Colombia. Maybe he'll go back to Greenland. Who the fuck knows? Okay? But understand that everything that has happened is purely the responsibility of the Republican Party. And that is what we have to constantly nail. But the way you nail it is with facts, with dollar facts. Now, I'm giving you some, so you can repeat and write it down, whatever. And I've done my best to provide good data for you. So if it's wrong, tell me. Always tell me. Tell me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I want to know. I'm not afraid of being wrong. I don't deliberately want to be wrong. But I expect you to tell me, Jan, number was wrong. And so now, I just also want to go back to, let's talk about FEMA for a second. Because, one of the big things when Trump was running, there was Helene, hit North Carolina in September of 2024. Trump went down there. We had a lot of Republican idiots in North Carolina who said, oh, we're not getting anything. And, and went to Trump and he was going to take care of them. And, Biden didn't do this. FEMA didn't do that, whatever. Lots of lies. And so let's talk about what did happen. So it was $60 billion in damage. Okay? The federal government gave $7 billion to the state for recovery so far. A fraction of what they need to repair the damage. Kristi Noem, oh boy, I'm not even going to say poor Kristi. All I'm going to say is karma. Kristi Noem implemented a rule requiring her personal approval for any FEMA spending over $100,000, creating a $17 billion bottleneck for recovery funds nationwide. Now, the recent drip of money in late February of 2026, 17 months after the storm, they got another $165 million in long-delayed disaster relief, with $92 million of that going to Helene recovery. That's $92 million against $60 billion in damage. Do you not understand? I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir. I'm hoping the choir will sing to others, honestly, or share this with people who, are Republicans or independents who voted for this idiot. These are the facts. There's nothing that shows us that they care about Americans. Nothing. There is not a thing they have done since January of 2025 that shows us that they actually care about us. They care whether we live or die or how we live. People, it's like they don't want to deal with the poor. They don't want to deal with people who have less than billionaires. They really don't. They don't give a shit. And they will go home, these being the representatives, and tell Joe Biden's Infrastructure Act as if it was Donald Trump who did it. All they do is lie. And it's time that every single time we call it out, and I know that most of you are, or that you're tired of doing it. But right now is pivotal because we are looking at the possibility of this war growing and more funds, but more important than the money, lives. The lives of young men and women are at stake who didn't sign up for this crap. They didn't sign up for a president who's demented and has no regard for their lives, who calls them losers and suckers. They had none of that. They have no regard. And they lie through their teeth. And so I am just providing you with some information in this particular frame of what they did in the big, beautiful bill that talks about healthcare and helping Americans survive, natural disasters. Nobody asked for those. And it shouldn't be a political thing. It wasn't under Biden, folks. It wasn't under Obama. It's always been under Trump and the GOP, who constantly say they don't want to fund the relief in California because California is a blue state. We know this. They don't want to help blue states. It's not all Americans together. The Democrats have never fucking done that. And it is time to stand proudly and talk about what we believe in and show the difference to these idiots who can't seem to figure out what side they're looking at of shit. That anybody is surprised that Trump went to war in Iran or is doing what he's doing to American citizens as well as undocumented immigrants with ICE. Anybody who's surprised by that has not been paying attention. And I'm going to leave it with that. But these are some numbers that you should hold close and be able to spout when some asshole says differently. Or share my video and let me do the talking. Again, please support my YouTube channel. Ask others to support it. It really means a lot to me. Thank you.